Let's talk a little bit more then about that relationship between Australia and the Queen, and also talk a little bit more about the impact that the Queen had on the British monarchy and the monarchy's future. I'm joined now from Sydney by Cindy McCreery, who's an expert on the British monarchy in the Department of History at the University of Sydney. Thanks very much for joining us in what is the middle of the night for us here in Paris, a little bit more sociable hours there in Sydney. First of all, just give us a little bit of a sense, if you like, of the feeling there in Australia, if you can. I mean, as Rochelle was saying there, Australia's had many moments when it's talked about breaking away, hasn't it, from the UK monarchy, but there's still an awful lot of love and respect for the Queen and for the monarchy as a whole, isn't there?
I think that's right. And I think what we have to remember is that Australia, like all countries and all communities, is a complex one. For older Australians, many people today will be reflecting on the Queen and Prince Philip's first momentous visit to Australia in 1954, where something like 3/4 of the population came out in the hot summer heat to wait on crowded streets to catch a glimpse of their Queen. Today, Australia is a very different nation. In 1954, most Australians, other than Indigenous Australians, could call Britain home in the sense of having Anglo-Celtic heritage. Today, we know that most Australians have Asian heritage, and indeed many Australians may not have any particular link with either Britain or the monarchy. And there are, of course, differences in generations, so that younger people may feel particular interest in and enthusiasm for younger royals like William and Kate, but also Harry and Meghan. But nevertheless, aside from all those differences, I think that Australians are coming together today in a sense of really quite quiet but profound sadness. And I think that's a feeling that will only grow in the weeks and months and years ahead, as all of us come to grips with the fact that the monarch that most of us have only ever known is no more. And it's a great watershed, I think, in the history not just of Australia, but I think really for most people on this planet today.
Looking ahead, I'm sure over the next week or so, this perhaps won't come up very much. That outpouring of affection will be what's important. A little bit further down the line now, we're now going to have King Charles III. I mean, do you suspect that question of breaking away from the monarchy is going to raise its head again? Is it going to be, presumably it's not going to be very easy for King Charles to keep that real link with Australia when it's had these moments in the past of potentially moving away?
Well, that's right. And indeed, we know even before this event, with the new incoming Labour government that took office in Australia in May this year, the new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, appointed an assistant minister who's tasked with preparing a pathway for Australia to have another referendum on becoming a republic. You may remember that in 1999, Australians voted in another referendum on becoming a republic. That failed, but it failed not so much because most people wanted necessarily to keep the monarchy, although perhaps a small majority did, but because there was disagreement about how a future head of state, how a president would be chosen. And that indeed is still, I think, a sticking point for the Republican movement in Australia. I think that while there is respect and admiration for Charles, and like his mother, he has visited Australia many times, not least with his first wife, Diana, although also with Camilla. But there is, I think, he will be haunted, not just in Australia, but elsewhere, by the memory of Diana. I think that will complicate his reign. And I think in Australia as well, there are other reasons why Australia is looking ahead to become a republic, although I don't see that as something that will happen suddenly. I think at the moment the appropriate response for Australians is to reflect on this moment and to honour the memory of Elizabeth.
Yeah, appropriate way of doing it. And indeed, there's a whole protocol, isn't there, for what happens not only in London, but also in other countries like Australia in these kind of occasions.
Yes, that's right. And we know that there's a very well-oiled plan, Operation London Bridge, that has been in the planning, as we know, not just for years, but actually decades. And we know what to expect in the next few days as the Queen's coffin will come by train to London. She'll lie in state in Westminster Hall before the funeral in about 2 weeks' time at Westminster Abbey, and then her burial next to her late husband, Prince Philip, in St George's Chapel in Windsor. So there is a very clear protocol of the next few weeks. It's after that I think we'll be less certain about how people will respond and whether or not Australia takes any formal steps towards becoming, or to at least opening up a definite date for a referendum on becoming a republic.
And that protocol, that means you think Australia will become involved in that? I mean, inevitably, I'm sure there'll be books of condolences and that kind of things which will be opened up across the country there.
Yes, of course. And of course, for Australians, the Queen's representative in Australia is the Governor-General. And I think that we'll see the Governor-General, to David Hurley, absolutely giving opportunities for Australians to express their grief, to express their feelings, and he will be getting out and about in the community and giving Australians a chance to mourn and to reflect on this reign.
Good to have you on the programme today. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Cindy McCreery, who's an expert on the British monarchy, joining us from the Department of History at the University of Sydney. Thanks very much for joining us today then.